Hey everybody, this is C. Balan Solis, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Power Apps or Power Platform in Higher Ed. As always, if you find the content that I'm providing useful, or if you have suggestions, I encourage you to both like it, to share it with others, and to leave me comments so I can make this content better and more relevant to you. Also, as always, anything I create here is most likely usable in other spaces. So don't get distracted by the fact that I call this Power Platform for Higher Ed. This is the space I work in. So in today's episode, we are going to do part 2 of the build that I started last week using a custom connector, in this case for the image repository called Pexels. Today, we are going to enhance the solution and create an additional interface and enrich the data that we get from Pexels with our own data so that we have a richer, more powerful solution at the end of the day. So hang in there. But first, let's go to my intro. So let's take a look at what we want to build in this section. We will do a little bit of a review from what we have built already, but I always like to start with the diagrams. So what we have is a situation where a company wants to put together a curated set of images to be used in their marketing and communications initiatives. So far, what we have done, thanks to the Pexels custom connector, which is available to Power Apps makers, we have established a connection after getting our API key to our Pexels account on the web. So from the Pexels account on the web, we can search and find images, and we can also access those images metadata, all the rich data such as titles, descriptions, links, etc., that are available directly from the Pexels website. We have delivered all that information to a curator experience on a Power App screen. What we want to do today then is we want to create a form inside of the curator's experience, and through that form, add additional information such as our own descriptions and categories to a separate database. We will also bring some of that metadata into our own table, but we will leave all the relevant images in the hands of the Pexels environment. This is a view of what we started building last time. Just to recap, we have a gallery, and the items for that gallery are fed by the Pexels connector, and they allow us to both search photos as well as list some curated photos and to show them at random. One of the interesting things we built last time was a paging environment. So if we look for things like we get a way to show 10 images per gallery page and then to continue but bring over some more images from other pages. So you notice we have a hit counter here, 138 hits divided into 14 pages, where the last one has 8 images. Okay. And then when we click on this image, you can see a larger rendering of the image, as well as a description provided by the photographer. We have means to download that image, and we have the means to connect to that photographer's collection on Pexels. Let's go ahead and build the ways in which we are going to enrich our environment here. Let's get out of this. And in this case, we're going to need a separate database, a separate environment to store the additional data we want to provide our users around this. Let's go ahead and go to SharePoint. So let's go to our Mayan no-code development group. And in this space, I am going to build a new list. And it's going to be a blank list. All right. So we're going to start with our title. And I'm going to take advantage of one of the features I love about Edge, and that is the split screen view. So I'm going to split my screen because I will need some reminders here, right? So let's open our items and let's go ahead and our list setting. I work with my title field, and this is going to be, we're going to change the title to image ALT description, which is going to map to the ALT data that we pull from Pexels. Now we're going to start adding more columns to this text column. I'm going to precede this from PX for all the stuff I get from Pexels. Then I'm going to add a series of URLs. I'm going to go through this rather quickly. I'm going to do the first one. And then after that, I am going to just accelerate through the video because it's going to be a repetition of a lot of the stuff we have done so far. I will start again with text. And I'll call it PX. And here I want to store the URL for the raw image. Okay, so I've been adding columns here to my SharePoint list. Each of these matches the URL for one of the image formats that Pexels makes available to us. So quick recap again, they offer us, besides photographer information, a URL for the raw image. That's the highest resolution image that the photographer provided. And then you can get from tiny to small to medium, large, extra large, what they call large to X. There's also a landscape format, and we're going to add the last one, which will be our portrait format URL. So essentially with these URLs, you can pull different resolutions and formats for the same image directly from the Pexels site, which is where all these images are stored. We're going to add now some of our own information that we want to provide to our users internally. One of them is the description field for a couple of reasons. Number one, not all photographers in Pexels are providing a description for their images. And secondly, that description may not be the one that is most useful to us. So we want to have our own means of describing for our media people what kind of image this is and why it's relevant to us. The other thing we want to do is to add a categories column. I'm not going to use the choices column. I prefer to use the text column here, but you can certainly use your own way of doing choices or categories. So here are my categories. So I've got all this ready to go. Let's turn this off and go back to our app. Okay, so now we need to add then our new data source. All right, so we go to our Mayan no coders, and here's our image depot data table. Just connect to that. First thing we want to do is to have a form that lets us input that additional information into the system. I am going to use this space here to create that form. And I am going to move these two labels up and out of the way. So in this area, I am going to insert container first. And in that container, I want to have an edit form. I want to connect that form to my image depot site. I realized that this form is going to take up a lot of space, so I'm going to expand this form all the way across. First the container, then the form. I want to keep a little bit of an idea here of what the image is that I'm working on. I want to make my container white, so the things in the background don't distract us. And then lastly, I do want to make this form take up this whole space. All right, let's take a look at the fields in our form, which we should rename form image data. We have the image description, the photographer, all the URLs, our own description, the category, and we really don't need an attachments field. So we're going to take that one off. So the next thing I want to do is pre-populate a lot of this information with the information associated with the item I have decided to save. So with that in mind, I'm going to unlock this and then set the default value to gallery1 dot selected, and then our ALT value. So that field will contain the ALT of the item that's been selected in the gallery. Let's take a look. The next one, we will wash, rinse, and repeat here. I unlocked it. So this item is going to be photographer associated with the selected item, and so on. So we're going to do another one here. First unlock it, and then original, copy this, and then I'm going to go quiet and do this for the rest of them. Here's the last one. Portrait. So we're harvesting all those URLs from Pexels to make them available to our editors. For our description, we're going to change this. So we're going to go the field, and for the description, I'm going to change this edit text to edit multi-line. And this one, here, choose the allowed values type. Right now, we don't have allowed values here. We're going to do the easy part. Of course, you can do this 20 different ways. Everybody has a better way to do it, including me. But for expediency, just going to unlock this, and we're going to put our items. We're going to have 4 categories: buildings, people, women in tech, and new tag. This could use some rearranging, right? So let's go ahead and take care of that. Again, in our field stuff, one of the things we probably don't need is to actually see all these different URLs. So I'm going to move this all the way to the top, the description and the categories. Then I'm going to work on the layout here, and we are going to change this to a 4-column layout. Then I'm going to hide all these different URLs. I'm going to hide that. Then I'm going to rearrange these. Okay, these need to be a little bit more equal. There we go. And probably to create a nicer experience, I'm going to move this up. Again, that, and we're going to make this category second item and place it right there. So that gives us a really nice experience for the user. Lastly, there are things we really don't want to change. So in this particular case, I'm going to set this display mode for this to display mode view, since we don't want to change the provided description and we don't want to change the name of the photographer either. So let's not give people that opportunity. Again, we go to display mode and we're going to do display mode view. So really, we're going to be saving all these different pieces plus description plus category for each of these graphics. But we need to be able to save the image, save the form. So let's add our icons. So I like the badges. I'm going to use this one. That's actually for saving. And we have save and cancel. Okay, so how do we trigger, first of all this activity? Let's check actually a couple of things. So first of all, we have no item to display. So that means we need to set the form to new. So we're always going to be submitting something new here from this side. So if we run this, right now we have the image building. We go here with legs, shoes. We could probably make this a little bit nicer if we add a custom card and provide the editor with a little view of that custom card over here. So let's do that. These are the things that as you start testing stuff, you start learning. So from our fields, we're going to add a custom card. And we're going to move that one after the description. And in that card, we're going to add an image control. So the source for that image is going to be whatever we have selected. And we're going to use our medium resolution image. There we go. That's a little bit better. Look at the experience. So we have the cat or the building, Yoda. That looks pretty good. I don't think we can make this any bigger. So we're going to leave it like that, but we're going to make this fit that whole card. And again, this is a non-editable one, so just have view. Let's save our progress so far. What's the next thing we want to do? This container, we want to make it visible if we like an image. So I'm going to start by defining a variable. And we're going to go to our screen and our unvisible. I'm going to add one more variable here. I'm going to set a new variable called viewForm, and I'm going to set it to false. So this container is going to be visible based on the state of that variable. All right, so right now it's set to true. Set it to false first. Okay, so we hide it. Now I'm going to set it to var viewForm, and it's going to be hidden. How do we make it visible? We're going to make that the onSelect property of this, and we're going to add it here. So I'm going to set var viewForm to whatever var viewForm is not. Okay, so we can hide. We can make this visible by clicking here. Here we are. How do we get out? Again, onSelect, set var viewForm to what var viewForm is not. Yep, we can hide it. What we have right now is a way to submit the data into our form, but we have not actually set the submit form, right? So we're going to set this out. And here, before we hide it, we want to reset the form. And then we want to hide it. But when we submit, we want to submit the form. And then when that submission is successful, so let's go to the form properties, then we want to reset it and hide it. There we go. Right, let's check this out. We run it. Okay, so we want a picture of a woman using a laptop. We find this one here. We think this one is appropriate, so we want to save it. So we're going to say this one goes for women in tech, and we're going to do a deeper description here. All right, so we have a description now, our own, and we have a category. We are going to go ahead and submit. All right, so let's take a look at our database. One of the things we want to do is, how do I know that I've already submitted this, right? And, you know, if I don't know, I can keep pushing on this button and making that picture show up in my database over and over again. You can see here, we refresh. We have all the information about this image submitted. It's a whole bunch, but there's something that is missing, and that is a way to connect this data set, this record, with the Pexels record that we were looking at before. And typically you do that with some kind of record ID that creates a relationship between the two. That is something that we're missing in our database, and we need to add to it. How do we go about assigning IDs to each of these things? Thankfully, Pexels already gave us part of that answer. So if we add a new label here just for visualizing purposes, and we ask for this item ID, we see that each photograph has, or each photo set really has, a different ID. So we can add that information into our data source. So let's do that. We're going to delete this one. And then we are going to add one more column. And that column is going to be a number. And we're going to call this our PX ID, our Pexels ID. It doesn't have any decimals, and I don't want to use the 1000 separator for this. I'm going to add that. When I come back here, I'm going to refresh my data source. And then let's bring up our form. So here's our form. We're going to need to add one more field. We're going to edit field. We're going to add one more field. That field is our Pexels ID. All right, now that field is sitting here at the bottom. We're going to hide it in a moment because, again, we don't really need to see it. We just need for functionality purposes. I unlock it, and I make the default content of that one our gallery1.selected.id. Here's this field. We have that information there. So in this case, again, we don't want to see that card necessarily. We just want to store that information so we can hide it. So let's repeat what we did before. Preview. You see here's one that doesn't have any descriptions. We're going to do this one again as people. And then write a quick description. And we store that. Let's take a look at our data. Now we have all the additional information. You remember the ALT description was there, so this appears as untitled. But now we have this Pexel ID. This is going to become useful here. We're going to grab this icon there. We're going to do two things. We're going to use the empty thumbs up if we have not selected the image, and we're going to use the filled thumbs up if we have used the image. So this is going to be a conditional statement. So we're going to use an if statement to see if information about this image already exists in our database. So we're going to do an if is blank using a lookup into our image data table, and we're going to check if our Pexels ID equals this item ID. And if that is true, use our icon thumbs up filled. Otherwise, use the icon thumbs up. And actually here, we're going to do up and close that. So let's take a look. Actually, I did it in reverse. I wanted to do this build, right? So this one we know we have stored already. So that shows a full thing. The other thing we want to do is we don't want to necessarily trigger that form again. We're going to use similarly something like this, but into the display mode. So, not only are we disabling it, not only are we changing this, but we're also disabling it because we want to not submit it again. So in this case, we are basically enabling to add new images to that data source. And once that image exists there, we don't want to add it again. You can build a variety of things around this. You can make this with an even increased functionality to say, hey, if the image exists, what I'm going to do is trigger the form in edit mode, and I can either update my descriptions or I can delete the image because we change our mind as to whether or not we want to use it. There's a huge number of extensions to be built here, but I hope you can see that there's some various ways to enrich this process with our own data, in our own functions, in our own tables. Right now, we have a fairly functional environment. Again, let's take a look at the whole space here. And I'm going to be adding some more images to the system just for us to then be able to play with others from the editor's perspective. So if we close this, we haven't used any of these for our work, but let's say we're going to use the pagoda here. So we like that. That's building. In this case, this works pretty well. So I can copy and paste it there. And I can add some more stuff. And I can submit this one. When I submit it, you see, even from the ones that we did not look for via search, but came from the images of the day's collection, we can see that we can save those too, not just those that we search for. Okay, let's do an AI search. And we see this one quite often, but let's do a DNA one. And of course, we're going to remove that annoying number there because we did that just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to say new tech, and we're going to save that. They look like flowers to me. I hope that's what they intended. And we're going to do this one. And save that. Let's get out of here and deal with this annoying ID there. Let's take that off. So we have an environment now where we can start harvesting this information. Let's take a look here. So we see that each of these has now all these URLs, additional descriptions, categorized, and they have their individual IDs in our data source. I am starting to feel that this is going to be a 3-part thing. I intended to only make it a 2-part thing, but I think we will save for part 3 how we develop then the user interface for the editors and how they can get to all these images that the curator has produced for them. So let's actually do that. I want to thank you for watching this and for following my channel. Please share the info, and hope to see you around in the next episode of Power Platform for Higher Ed or wherever other environment you are working in. Thank you.